Hey there, welcome back. So, if you clicked on this video, you're wondering, is Path of Exile 2 worth the $30 for early access? So today, we're going to talk about it. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience of the Path of Exile 2 early access. I did finish the campaign, I did play some maps, I did see some of the mechanics, I did explore a couple of different builds, and I'm just going to give you my take on it, how I experienced it, and if it's worth it for you to jump in now, or should you wait until the full release. So, let's get into it. Let's talk about the mechanics first. One of the biggest changes for Path of Exile from Path of Exile 1 to Path of Exile 2 is the introduction of the WASD gameplay. Now, if you didn't know, Path of Exile 1 has a point-to-click style movement, which is the same as Diablo 2. So in that sense, you move the character with your cursor, and then you cast the spells and everything else with other keybinds. In Path of Exile 2, there was a big push for um, being able to use a controller seamlessly, and then also using WASD on keyboards to kind of free up your movement and have it more precise, and to leave you with a mouse to kind of disconnect the movement and targeting from the mouse. I think overall this is super good. My experience has been great. Am I going to go and check out the point to click uh, movement again? I don't think I will. I really like the way that they did it in Path of Exile 2, because it is a very different game as well, and we'll get to that in the later parts. But overall, the movement was the biggest change. It does feel a lot slower than Path of Exile 1, because it's focused heavily on bosses and kind of more meaningful progression through the campaign, and we're going to talk about that as well. Um, Other than that, mechanics wise, it is definitely different, but familiar enough that if you played Path of Exile 1, it's not going to be a huge difference. So, in that regard, I think it's a good mix for both veteran players and new people looking to get into this ARPG. So, with that being said, there isn't any other major mechanics that I would say changed, besides maybe something that's going to be more in the lines of the actual skill tree and things like that, but I'm gonna get into it later. So that's kind of mechanics overview. The biggest change, obviously, the movement. There is an emphasis on the dodge roll ability, which every class has now, and in Path of Exile 1, that wasn't the case. I think it's a good move and it can be balanced better, but as of right now, for the early access, I think it's a great experience. Obviously, people are going to find ways to be more effective than others, but overall, I think it's okay. Moving into graphics and performance. Now, graphics wise, I think it's beautiful. The game looks next gen compared to Path of Exile 1, which also it looked great. I mean, but it is a pretty old game at this point, and they push it to the max, obviously. Um, the one thing about graphics in Path of Exile 2, it is extremely well done. The the actual immersion of the areas is great. I think it has the atmosphere down. The art style is phenomenal. It also makes you appreciate um, Diablo 2 inspiration, probably, because Diablo 2 was very grim and dark, and in kind of Diablo 3 felt a lot more cartoonish, at least to me. So going from Path of Exile 1 into Path of Exile 2, I felt a lot more um, claustrophobic in a sense, but I think it was a good thing. The game made you scared in a sense, and I think it's great because it's supposed to be this kind of gory, grim world, right? So from that standpoint, graphics wise, I don't really have any complaints. It looks beautiful. It's set well. The art style of the new items is great. Overall, I'm super happy with the graphics. Now, performance wise, there is definitely certain areas that perform better than others, and I think this is probably also an early access thing. I have a pretty beefy computer, and I didn't really have that many issues. However, when I got into maps and when I got into huge packs of mobs, there was sometimes dips, which in some cases actually made me die when I shouldn't have probably. And I hope that gets kind of patched up. But other than that, I don't have anything specifically to say about performance that was like terrible, or to a point where I couldn't stand it. Right. So definitely a next gen title. It is harsh on your components in a sense that you will get, the use of out of your components. It is not a breeze to play, but you can also tweak a lot of the settings, and they did a pretty good job of allowing you to have that freedom to kind of like make the game look less like eye candy and more uh, and to let it perform better. So in that regard, I think I'm okay with it, but I hope that there's some performance upgrades and improvements on full release. Moving into sound design and music, I think compared to Path of Exile 1, they nailed it. They killed it. Sound design is amazing. The music for every area just felt so fitting, and I know they put so much effort into music, and I'm super happy about that aspect of it. Um, the music was great. I didn't get bored of it. The boss music is insanely well done, and the big part of Path of Exile 2 is its bosses. Like the bosses and the mini bosses feel a lot more impactful, and from that standpoint, I feel like there is I don't have something bad to say about the sound design or the music, if that makes sense. Like, especially for an early access game, I think they nailed it with all aspects when it comes to sound. Now, we're getting into content and replayability. This is the most important part for most people. So, content wise, I'm going to talk about the campaign first. The campaign is well paced. It's much longer than Path of Exile 1. I'm going to tell you that much. And also, there is slight small things that I didn't like about it. So, campaign wise, the quest line is much more immersive than Path of Exile 1. I'm going to say that it's probably like 3 to 4 times longer than Path of Exile 1, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it makes the campaign more meaningful, and it's not something that you kind of rush through just to be done with it if you're making new characters. So, without giving any spoilers, I think it was a well worth it $30 spent on just playing through the campaign once, in my opinion, because they focus so heavily on making really meaningful areas and bosses. However, small thing that kind of got out of hand later on is that you would get into some of these areas and there would be a decent amount of backtracking if you don't take the proper route. Now, this is kind of like the luck of the draw, right? Because a lot of it is RNG to keep it interesting, and there was definitely a lot of areas where I kind of backtracked multiple times, and this is not a it's not a huge deal because they give you kind of checkpoints and you can kind of teleport between those. So I think that's a good implementation. But I think if they made the maps a little bit smaller, that would be probably better. But I'm not sure yet. I feel like, I play through the whole campaign. So that's playing through Act 1, 2, and 3 on the normal difficulty, then on cruel difficulty, and then you get into the maps. And I think it was fine. Definitely wished it was a little bit shorter. But overall, campaign wise, the bosses make it very worth it, right? Even if you get frustrated with an area and it's kind of like, oh, come on, I just want to be out of here. I want to be done. This is taking way too long. Then you get to like the mini boss or the main boss of the area, and it's all worth it. So not bad in that sense either. Replayability wise, I think it's Path of Exile, right? Like, you want to make a million characters and you want to make a million combinations, and I think they did a great job uh, giving you so many tools to experience the game so many different ways, because there is a huge skill tree, a huge atlas tree. For people that play the game, they will understand. There is also a ton of spells. You can mix and match classes, so essentially you can make subclasses. There's going to be more subclasses coming with ascendancies, and they're just infinite number of builds and things that you can do and try, and they're all somewhat viable. And I say somewhat because um, the big blocker for new players in Path of Exile 1 was the fact that the kind of the barrier to entry was really high, in a sense of once you finish the campaign, you're kind of lost because the game has so many things for you to do and it can get overwhelming really fast. But I think in Path of Exile 2, they did a wonderful job of kind of easing you into it and kind of explaining it to you to a point where if you go down a path or a rabbit hole, you will probably end up being okay. And I found myself doing two different builds throughout the campaign, and I was really satisfied, and I kind of felt proud of my build. Um, it wasn't too hard to identify where my weakness is. It was not super easy, but it was fairly easy to kind of change classes and to uh, allocate your skill points in the skill tree pretty easily. Um, I think in that regard, they did a wonderful job, and I think they're gonna balance it more because there's definitely certain things that are gonna get nerfed and certain things that are gonna get buffed. But that's just the nature of things of a game like Path of Exile, where you just gotta give it to a lot of people to play, and they will find ways to break it. And then things that are super super meta and super strong over time, they're gonna kind of uh, go down. And if something is just busted or broken all the way, then GGG is going to nerf it, and I think that's fair. So that's it for content and replayability. Let's go on to the next subject: community and developer kind of feedback. GGG is super good about keeping the players in the loop about the changes they're looking to make on their Twitter account. They're pretty good about giving updates if there's any issues. On launch day, it wasn't that bad either. I think they're doing pretty good in that department. The community of people in Path of Exile, the veterans can be hit or miss. They can be either super nice or they can be super douchey. I only really experienced maybe like one or two douchebag and about 100 nice people. And I think most people are very excited to talk to you about this game because there's so much theory crafting and they're excited to share their ideas with you. So I think in that regard, it's a great community, great developers, and just a thumbs up overall for me in that regard. Now, monetization. If you don't know, so Path of Exile 2, obviously a $30 barrier to entry for early access. I think it's fine. I think it's worth it. But monetization comes in cosmetics, right? Like pretty much everything in Path of Exile 2 is cosmetics wise. And then there's also a small barrier to entry with the stash tabs. Now, what are stash tabs? This is like basically your chest where you stack your gear and put your things in. I personally spent probably about $30 worth of stash tabs like back in the day when I started playing Path of Exile 1, and I think it was worth it. You get a couple of stashes because you have your currency, you have like all these different items that you can store, and you know, to some people that is pay to win. I don't think it really is because it is a game that's free to play. If you want to play just one class, you're totally fine with the default stashes. That's just my personal opinion. A lot of people will disagree, but I think it's fine, really. And considering that it's a free to play, especially on, you know, the Path of Exile 2 is going to be free to play on release, there's nothing wrong with, you know, paying a couple of extra dollars for a video game that entertains you for hundreds of hours. You can easily play Path of Exile 1 for 500 hours and still have a ton of stuff to do. So I think there's a value in supporting them and, you know, buying a couple of stash tabs just so you can kind of have multiple characters and multiple different things you want to do. So monetization, I don't think you can do it any better than Grinding Gear Games does it, really, in my opinion. So yeah, that's for monetization. Pretty solid. Like they give you a ton of cosmetics that are super pretty. They give you stash tabs if you want to have some kind of quality of life when you're mapping and doing things that are kind of more end game related. And I think it's fine. Let's move on. Now, strengths and weaknesses of Path of Exile 2. So let's talk about this. Its biggest strength is the change in gameplay. So Path of Exile 1, I found myself kind of zoning out 80% of the time, and 20% of the time when it was like a hard boss, I would be really zoned in. Now in Path of Exile 2, it's like flipped. Like 80% of the time, you have to be super, super, super locked in, and you gotta know what you're doing. You gotta pay attention, and I love that because the gameplay changed so much that it's slower, but it's much harder. And don't let this intimidate you. It is almost like they took Elden Ring and Diablo and made a baby out of it, right? But in the best sense possible. Like dodge rolling super important because you have heavy hitter enemies that are kind of slower, but if they hit you, they can like one or two shot you. You have super fast enemies. You have kind of ranged enemies. You have bosses that can be either super slow and super deadly or super fast, and you gotta kind of uh, gotta move around a lot. So I think it's a really good mix of just gameplay that's super, super, super engaging, and they did such a good job. And I think this is the Path of Exile 2's biggest like strong point, right? Um, Now, other than that, I think another strong point for Path of Exile 2 is going to be its classes and customizability. There is obviously the itemization that's slightly harder, but it's more impactful. So you will put an item on, and you will immediately feel the impact of that item, no matter what it gives you. Like if it gives you resistance, if it gives you more armor, more evasion, higher damage through certain stats. So I think they did a really good job of making items more impactful, and it's much harder to craft items, which was in PoE 1 not easy, but it was much easier than Path of Exile 2 is. Now, its weaknesses, I would say that there is certainly I haven't experienced many bugs, but I think there is a lot of balancing that needs to be done because certain maps I would kind of go through as a breeze. And just to not spoil anything, maps are endgame content, and they're these isolated instances of a certain area or biome, and then you gotta kill essentially either a boss or multiple kind of unique enemies in that area to complete a map. And some maps that are kind of the same tier, it goes from tier 1 to tier 15. Some maps that are tier like 3 would be super easy, and then some maps would be extremely hard, and I would die like multiple times trying to complete the tier 3 map. So there is definitely a lot of balancing that needs to be done. And there is, I feel like, loot balancing that needs to be done as well, because I feel like right now, at least, I feel that some item types are more scarce, and I do believe they're gonna buff it. So those would probably be my weak points, the balancing part of it. And I can't really think of anything else that's kind of standing out to me as a big weakness. All bosses felt good. The enemies, as I said, there's certain like ranged enemies that will kill you really quickly, like off screen. So I think they're gonna fix that. And it's especially stressful with certain range characters where it kind of takes you a while to get your attacks out or do something, and then all of a sudden you see like 5 darts at you, and you're dead, and there's like no way for you to react to that. So that would kind of be my strength versus weaknesses. And overall, I'm pretty happy. I think they did a good job. So let's jump into final thoughts and recommendations. Does this answer your question? Is it worth it? To me, the answer would be 100% yes. $30 to get so much entertainment. I'm talking about early access that is probably like 60% of the game out, is definitely worth it. More early access players is going to mean that there is actually a better game coming out on full release, and I'm super excited for that. They said that it's supposed to be 6 months. We are currently in about 2 weeks of early access, and I don't see anything wrong with it so far, honestly. There is definitely things they can improve upon, but overall, for $30, you're getting a solid game, solid campaign, interesting quests, um, good end game, and just a ton of customizability. Like you can make so many different characters. So for $30, I would say yes, definitely grab it if you're a fan of ARPGs. It is wonderful. The loot feels meaningful. The weapons are cool. The uniques are cool. Super, super fun. For the record, I didn't state it earlier in the video. I did play a mercenary, which is a new class. I tried both a like grenadier approach, and then I tried like a projectile type of build with Pierce, and both super fun to play. Uh, really, really, really good experience so far, and I'm excited to play more, to experience more. I might even start making more Path of Exile 2 videos for people, because it's just been such a blast playing through it. But have you played Path of Exile 2? Let me know what your thoughts are. If you did, what class did you play? I'm looking for some build ideas. And then, what was your favorite thing about the game? Let me know in the comments. And I hope this helps you make a decision. Really, I think it is looking like a bright future for Path of Exile 2 full release. If you don't want to spend the money, I don't blame you. I believe that the game on full release is going to be insane, and it's going to be free to play. There's going to be so many players. You can squad up with your mates and just do crazy things. It's a super fun game. Go check it out. If you like what you saw, don't forget to like the video, comment, subscribe. You can also hit the little bell. It's, I think, on this side. And then you can see when the new videos are coming out. I also do live stream on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, usually at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day. Bye.